Hello, and welcome to a conversation between emotionally assertive minds. I'm Kaylee Bishop, the show's producer, and I'm delighted to introduce another thought-provoking episode. Today we explore the emotional landscape of leadership, where the ability to connect, bond, and communicate with emotional clarity is more vital than ever. Your host is Professor John Parr, founder and creator of the Emotional Assertiveness Model. He's joined by the brilliant Dr. George Cole-Reiser, licensed psychologist, renowned hostage negotiator, and author of Hostage at the Table and Care to Dare. Together, they'll examine what it truly means to lead with emotional intelligence, the cost of ignoring emotion, and how psychological safety and trust underpin effective leadership. Whether you're a leader, a coach, or simply curious about what makes human connection work, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to the series of a discussion with, a conversation with, and today my discussion is with a friend of mine from years ago, George Cole-Reiser, and I will ask George to introduce himself to you before we have our discussion. So George, will you say a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, well, it is certainly a pleasure to be here, John. We've covered a lot of territory over the years, and it has been a while since I've seen you, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm a professor at IMD in Lausanne, Switzerland, teaching leadership and organizational behavior, author of 2 books, and also a hostage negotiator, and doing many things in terms of using concepts to develop leadership, help people. And our area of overlapping is emotional intelligence and how to have leaders be more impactful by being able to inspire people while still getting good results. So that's basically what I am about.
Thank you, George. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you, because I've been a fan of your work for a very long time. And actually use some of your material in the material that I put out there in the market. I want to cut that and come back and say it again. So I've been a fan of yours for a very long time and use your material in emotional assertiveness training. I'd love to have this conversation with you, George.
Wonderful. Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
So what we do, George, is we apply the emotional aspect of relationship in what we're training. It's a model that I wrote my master's degree thesis on back in the late 90s, early noughties, and has developed into what we now call the emotional assertiveness model. It's applied emotional intelligence. And we say it's all about bonding and attachment and human relationships. And I know that is very deep ingrained in what you do, George.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I think there's been a big change in leadership, and emotions have become more and more important for leaders to understand, because especially since COVID-19, the command and control type leadership is basically dead. So now leadership is seen as a relationship.
Yes.
And as a relationship, they have to be able to bond, be able to connect, deal with emotions, and especially the emotion of loss. Behavior economics, as you well know, John, has demonstrated how important loss is in decision making. And it's very important how people feel in doing work with the organization, working for a boss, working for a team. And when people are unhappy, things go south.
Absolutely, yeah. Loss is so important in change management. The thing that's often missed, that we're looking at the excitement of where we're going without looking at what we're having to leave behind in order to get there.
Yeah, very good. Well, one of the big changes has been for moving leadership, and I'm primarily working in the arena of leadership, and your concepts and your work on assertiveness and emotional intelligence is very important. Emotional intelligence was a true game changer, because there was that philosophy: tell people what to do, measure what they do, and so be it. But that doesn't work anymore. And so then came the idea of psychological safety with Amy Edmondson's work and how people feel so that they speak up. And everything from human error to failure becomes important to understand in terms of emotions, because that they don't feel psychological safety. And 80% of people, this is what's shocking, John, 80% of people report that they don't feel safe with their boss. They don't trust. And when you lose trust or don't have trust, you can't really lead effectively. And people are always on the defensive, as you well know.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the points that we pick up, is that trust is built through applying authentic emotions in our relationships. We differentiate between an authentic emotion and an unhealthy emotion, which in TA we would have called the racket emotions or
Yeah,
cover-up emotions.
yeah,
And this is just how trust is blown out of the water when we start to treat one another with disrespect instead of treating one another as equals that have different opinions, different attitudes, but at the same time are worthy of respect.
yeah. Well, that's a very powerful word. And even when you're in the role of a leader, you may have the authority role, but you still treat them with respect.
Yes,
And you become sensitive to the bonding. You and I share this feeling that and research that bonding is so important, how you connect. It's the number one reason why leaders fail. They don't bond, they don't connect.
yes,
It may be how they talk, it may be their person effect, it may be all kinds of things. And there again, we come back to our basic TA, which still is a fundamental part of what we both
yes,
do
yeah,
in
absolutely.
being able to build that sense of trust in people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was through TA that I came to my model, George, back in the 90s, working as a therapist and realizing that I had two kinds of people: those people that, when they're in distress, get into their heads, and the others, when they're in distress, get into their emotions and don't combine the two. And that was way back in the 90s when TA led me to finding that for myself. And
That was certainly cutting edge.
yeah,
And what we know that we are basically feeling beings who happen to think.
yes,
And for years, it was taught the other way. We
absolutely. Yeah,
think, therefore we are.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
emotions precede thinking and cognition. So we have to understand we're fundamentally emotional beings who happen to
absolutely. Yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah,
and how to be able to build off of that idea of how people feel.
yeah,
And as a hostage negotiator, it is so critical to be able to build a bond and connect even with your enemy, even with an adversary.
yes,
You don't have to like someone to find a common bond.
absolutely.
And hostage negotiators get a 90%, 95% success rate by creating a bond with a hostage taker, who often are not very pleasant people, and by listening to the pain point, the loss, and making concessions. 95% is pretty good, but they give choice. They don't tell the hostage taker to come out.
Yeah,
The power of choice becomes very important, and using questions and understanding how the other person sees the world and get into the mindset of a hostage taker in order to make that change so that they find hope and they give up their hostages.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's so heartwarming to hear you say this, and so affirming of what we're doing as well. So I love the fact that although we've developed individually and separately for a long time, we seem to be both on similar paths.
Well, it's very important for understanding emotions and how to assert emotions, how to be able to express those emotions. And we know that people often hide the emotions. And as a leader, I'm especially in that arena of leadership, they have to be able to deal with emotions and in conflict situations, difficult situations, emotions are feeding that conflict, and how to be able to assert
Yeah,
themselves, but always in, I know what you believe also, is respect. And powerful things like dialogue, how much you talk. one of the big mistakes leaders make is they talk too much. They don't answer questions. And this was an old TA concept of how to have a good dialogue and be able to engage someone in a really clear way. And as you well know, there's a lot of research now on the difference between kindness and niceness.
Yes.
So, uh, how to be a kind leader, but not necessarily being nice. We like people to be nice, but nice is often a form of lying. Kindness, you say the truth. And
Yes.
kindness, you put the fish on the table
Yes.
and be able to deal with whatever that difference is.
Yeah, absolutely. And where I also see a resonance is in our view that human beings as a species, before we had language, we had emotions, and that's how we communicated. And when we're born, that's all we've got, emotions. That's how babies communicate. And somehow or other, we've twisted the whole show to say, oh, no, we're thinking sentient beings and emotions have to be squashed into second place. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, you're absolutely right, John. We're born with that sensation experience and feeling experience. And there's evolutionary emotions like fear. People are fear of spiders or fear of heights
Yes,
or fear of darkness or
yes,
being
yep,
underwater.
yep, yep,
These are evolutionary
yep.
emotions that help keep us alive. The problem is people often use emotions to assess risk when there's no risk really there. And
Yes,
so from
yeah,
an evolutionary point of view, they trigger emotions and then past experiences. And you know this, John, and you do it in your work. You're really head of the game on this. That people have emotional triggers, and those emotional triggers in the present are never there for the first time. They go back to our history.
absolutely, yeah,
And so we're really focused on helping leaders understand how did they become a leader?
yeah,
What happened to you? Not what's wrong with you. There's no born serial killers. Evil is not born in people, but we know how to create a terrorist. We know how evil can be shaped by what happened to you. So
yes,
your relationship with your mother, your father, your grandparents, your siblings, your extended family, your school, teachers, other kids. All of these help wire the brain and shape the leadership.
yeah,
And when
absolutely,
people don't deal with the trauma, it distorts the way they lead.
yep, yep, absolutely. I was thinking when you were talking earlier about our histories, what we bring with us into the present, how Burns' concept of the rubber band is at play there too. How if we're aware of that, we can sever the band and get back into the here and now and be dealing with the real person in the room rather than ghosts from the past.
Ghosts from the past, the rubber band emotion, how to understand that, and hiding emotions, the racket emotions.
Yes,
People are not honest about how they feel. And what we're teaching and what you teach, I think, in emotional assertiveness, is how to label correctly. One
yes,
of the tools a hostage negotiator does is ask questions, give choice, and help people label their emotion. It sounds like you are angry. It sounds like you are sad. It sounds like you're afraid. And in the end, what we do as a hostage negotiator is sell hope. And that's how we get that 95% success rate in helping people change their mindset. And oh my goodness, and you know this, John, it's in your work as well. The mindset determines the state we're in, and the state we're in is based on emotions. How do you
yes,
feel?
yes,
And then comes
yeah,
that whole negativity bias, which
yeah,
uh, triggers the survival mechanism.
yeah. I love the way that you put it when you're talking to the hostage. It sounds like, it looks like, it's like you're not attributing them with something. You're simply checking out the data,
Yeah.
and I love that it's not
Yeah.
like saying I know what you're feeling.
Yeah. Or this is what you're
This
feeling.
is what you're
It's
feeling.
it's exploring, it's inquiring.
Yes, yes,
And hostage negotiators are trained. And now, for the most part, all hostage negotiators are police authorities or police officers, and they go through extensive training I mean, there are teams of hostage negotiators all around the world, and those, at least in the Western world, US and Europe, they go through extensive training in how to use questions and how to use dialogue, and especially how to deal with emotions.
Yeah.
And every hostage negotiator has to come to terms with the emotional triggers, because once something is triggered, Mamma mia, you know the rest of the story. It
Yeah,
can be
absolutely, George.
blown out of proportion.
Over the years, I've come to love some of your anecdotes about times when you were in that situation, George. You be willing to share one now, one of your hostage negotiations?
Well, well, John, I've done a number of risky things, and I don't think they were stupid. But when I first got out of graduate school and got my PhD, I was trained as a mediator, and I got my first job with the police department, going in with police officers to help de-escalate domestic violence. We knew 35% of people were killed by family members or friends or acquaintances or in domestic violence situations. So the idea was, if we get mediators in early, maybe we can reduce that. And we did. We managed to succeed, and the research is very clear on how mediation does work. And I was invited to deal with a man named Sam who was psychotic, holding a nurse hostage with the scissors. I got into the emergency room at the hospital, and he was not happy to see me. Put his scissors to my throat after cutting Sheila's throat, and we got through a whole negotiation to be able to get him to come out cooperatively and de-escalate him out of that psychosis. It was really about asking questions, about getting him to think of the future. And this is one of the things that also happens in emotions. How do you The present situations often make people feel like they have to survive or their survival is a threat. But my question to him was, how do you want your children to remember you? As he said he was going to kill himself, kill me, kill everybody he can, holding the scissors to my throat. And the question was, how do you want your children to remember you? And this triggered a whole change in state. And within 10 minutes, she got out. Another 20 minutes, he was in an emergency room, so we had to get him to another part of the hospital for medical treatment. And it was a successful negotiation. I learned a lot from that.
And you must have been on a roller coaster of emotions through that.
Oh my God, I had an amygdala hijack at one point when he started coming to me saying, and when he cut her throat, actually, I was in physical proximity, but he was not facing me directly. He cut Sheila's throat, and that's when I thought, oh, I had an amygdala hijack. Then he came to me and she shouted, my kids, my kids. That was Sheila's last wish. She wanted to see her kids, and that pulled me out of that amygdala hijack. And then another whole part of my state started to kick in, and I used all that TA, a lot of it by the seat of my pants. And being an old farm boy from Ohio, I managed to use words as my weapons.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And in the midst of all of that, you had to show a great deal of ability to regulate your emotions, George. And I think that's a thing that's so important, that we have to learn how to self-regulate. It's what our children need us to teach them when they're growing up. And because as parents, often we haven't ever learned how to do it, we don't know how to teach our children how to do it.
Mamma mia, that's another whole story. How we learn to deal with emotions from our parents. Parents who kill desires in the children. They don't recognize the desires, suffocate them, but especially the self-regulation. This was one of the things Dan Goldman emphasized in his emotional intelligence work that I know you use, is first to be aware and then be able to regulate that. And then you use that to regulate other people, and ultimately to come to the position of empathy or social consciousness. So it's a brilliant concept, but you're right. You have to regulate your own emotions. And many people do not. They do what we call being a hostage to themselves.
Yes.
So they are shameful, or they're scared, or something internal triggers guilt, loss, whatever. or they are a hostage to somebody else or to a situation. Never, ever be a hostage to anyone, anything, or even to yourself.
It's one of your fine books, Georgia, Hostage at the Table.
Yeah. It demonstrates how the techniques of hostage negotiation can be used for psychological hostage taking. And I think everybody, John, I don't know what your experience is, goes through times when they are a psychological hostage to others or to themselves. So we all have to learn how to, as you say, regulate, be able to manage that and keep your mind's eye focused on what goal you want as an outcome.
Yeah, yeah. It's the project I'm on at the moment, writing a book about how the general stressors that we're under at any given time sets the threshold of where our amygdala is. And
Yeah.
so how much it takes to splash the water out of the bucket. And so we had the importance then of managing our stress and our distress to give ourselves the room to be able to face situations and self-regulate.
Yeah. And that's a very interesting concept, John. And I know you work in that arena as well. Sounds like you're writing on it.
Yeah.
Stress. Because how many times do we hear people complain? I got too much stress. There's this stressor, that stress. The problem, as Hans Selye said, the father of stress theory, it's not the stressor that's the problem. It's the emotion. It's
Yes.
the emotion that is triggered.
Yes.
So we have to learn to help people understand that stress and problems with stress are basically emotional. People don't regulate their emotions or
Yes.
control their
Yeah.
emotions.
Well, indeed, stress is one of the golden threads that runs through the work that I do, George. It all started for me with stress. I was working with Hewlett Packard for many years on stress management programs. I designed a program for them and ran it. And at the beginning of the program, I was teaching them to be aware of the difference between stress as an actual external stressor and our response to stress, which people call stress, which isn't stress itself. It's actually how we respond to stress. And I used to say, okay, just relax. I'm going to make a sudden loud noise, and I want you to be aware of what happens in your body when I do that. And then at one point, I would suddenly shout very loudly a karate ki, and of course I could see them all. And I began to
They would jump out of their chair, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I noticed that it was always the muscles in the shoulders and the arms and I thought, wow, that tells me that the very first reaction that we have when we experience an external stressor is anger. It's arousal in the limbic system, which gives us adrenaline, and it's anger. What the hell's that all about? That way back in the early 90s was where I started the journey.
Wow.
So
Brilliant, John. I know you've developed your ideas over time as well, being able to bring in literature and research to
yes, yeah,
understand.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing about emotion, you mentioned anger. Anger is a very powerful one. I mean, anger is good. People need anger, but
Yes.
anger can be destructive.
Yeah.
It can kill you. But you want energy? Get angry. People who can't get angry get depressed, or
Yep.
they do other things. But how to understand how to choose how much how you charge it. We all can overcharge or immediately charge, and then it goes into tension states in the body. You
Yes.
mentioned the shoulders.
Yes.
Every organ, every part of the body
Absolutely.
can
Yes.
hold emotion, and we have a choice how to be able to respond. There's that little point between the activation of the stressor and the stress response where there's a moment of in between. Many people don't recognize that, they don't use it, and so they are hostage to the situation.
Yes.
We always have choice.
Yeah. I actually say that anger is so important that if we don't know how to be authentically and appropriately angry, we can't really be truly happy, and
Yeah,
we can't really have healthy relationships.
yeah,
That anger is a force that's supposed to drive us towards others in a
yeah,
problem-solving mode, not in
yeah.
a mode of destruction. So it's only when we misapply anger and we use it inappropriately that we cause destruction. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, most of the anger that we see expressed is of the unhealthy kind. It's
Yeah.
really unhappy to watch people doing this.
Well, and I think, well, I know you know this, John, that emotions really are positive. They have a constructive process.
Yes,
And they serve to react when we think something is dangerous to us or it's a threat to our welfare. In that
yes,
sense,
yeah,
there is no such thing as a negative emotion. There
yes,
are destructive emotions, and how to be able then to manage perceiving the external event as not life threatening. And we are not good at risk assessment. We tend to drift to that negative bias to see our well being threatened when it's really not threatened.
yes,
We're not
indeed.
very good at risk assessment.
Yeah, yeah,
And then loss. I mean, we mentioned anger, but I think even more powerful from behavioral economics is understanding when people feel loss and how that affects decision making. And this is what I'm teaching in organizations, leaders to be able to talk to people about their loss. Many
yes,
of them, and you were at Hewlett Packard, so you know what it is to be in sales or to see sales. We always have the best product, the best portfolio, but we have to hear what we're selling. What laws is it going to trigger? And people don't naturally resist change. They resist the pain of change, the fear of the unknown, and all the emotions that come with what will change in their identity and in their attachment system. And you name all those needs that are so fundamental. And the loss is the trigger. And this is what behavioral economics identified already in 1992, that it is the most powerful thing in decision making. So it's not just anger, it's not just fear, it's not just sadness, it's the combination of all of those.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I get so excited hearing you speaking and hearing how much that there is in parallel with what we're doing. It really is
Yeah.
touching for me.
No, we're on the same page. We've
We're on
been
the
on the
same
same
page.
page. We worked together in ITAA,
Yes,
and we
yes,
had lots of things crossing. But leaders, you know this, John, leaders are not good at dealing with emotions. Organizations tend to bury emotions, and the toxicity is horrible in organizations. It's terrible if you have a leader who is not building trust, who is toxic with emotional triggers. And trust does exist. It's possible for them to be a secure base. And I like that concept from John Bowlby of secure base.
yes,
But to be a secure base, you have to stimulate and trigger trust. And you do that with a whole number of things, including how people feel. Just something as simple as a smile. Sometimes getting people to smile
yes.
is a very powerful person effect that will change the whole atmosphere, but
Yeah.
especially how they use words.
I'm thinking also, George, as we're talking, I'm observing how I have eye contact with you. You have obviously got your system set up beautifully to provide eye contact. Mine has a camera down here, and
Okay.
and and so when I'm looking at you, which is like I experience a magnet when I'm with people. I want to look at them and I want to look them in the eye.
Yeah.
And here I am in a Zoom meeting with you up there looking you in the eye, but I know that you must not be seeing me looking you in the eye because I'm
Occasionally I do. Sometimes you look
because
down, sometimes you look up.
because I
But
got my camera down here, but when I look at my camera,
yeah,
I'm not looking at you. So I find that really difficult, and I'm
yeah.
still trying to figure out how does George do that? How do you get your camera in such a place that it doesn't block your screen? And
Well, it's really old-fashioned IT. The camera is in the computer.
ah,
So I'm not using an external or other camera. But that raises another one, John, which I know you know about, and that is how emotions work in the world of AI and in the world of IT. We all do too many Zoom meetings, and we don't
yes,
have personal meetings. And how does seeing somebody on camera or when they don't show themselves. That's why many leaders, they insist people don't turn off their camera.
Yeah.
Put your camera on so we can see you.
Yeah.
Now, it's not the same nonverbal cues that are there when you're in this room with them, but it's a better than being hidden behind a dark screen.
Yes. Yeah. I struggle with Zoom, George. I have to confess, my eyesight is not good. So this is not so bad when I've got like just one person with me in Zoom, because I can see you. I've got you in a big enough frame for me to be able to see your face and to see what's going on with the muscles. But when I've got a group and
Yeah.
they're all the size of postage stamps, I am utterly lost. It's like I've lost one of my main communication channels. I can't see what's going on people's faces. I
Yeah.
can't see how they're interacting with one another.
Yeah.
That to me really dampens the whole experience of having a group on Zoom.
Yeah. And the bonding that comes through Zoom or Teams, how do you create a bond? And that means how you use your voice. We actually encourage some leaders to get voice training because they don't have a voice that is calming or soothing. There's a voice that we as hostage negotiators have to use to de-escalate. But that doesn't mean to be passive. Some people are just plain boring.
Yeah.
Some people don't answer questions. They talk too much. How to get them to dialogue to keep the interest in the other at a very high level.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Talking to you is not boring, George.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
In person or in Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah.
George, thank you for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we draw to a close?
Well, the one thing I would really say to people is to be aware, as you mentioned, and that's part of your work, be aware of what you're feeling, and how you feel changes the way you perceive life. It actually changes the way you perceive reality. And when we have a negativity bias, or we're filled with anger, or we're filled with anxiety and fear, or we're filled with sadness, it distorts how we see the world so that we have an adventure before us, the joy of life, the joy of work. And most people don't really live the full joy of work or live the full joy of life because they're carrying emotions that block them from feeling that. And we know from TA and Burns' work that when people hold negative emotions and they easily are triggered with a rubber band or they're into a racket, how they avoid the reactive emotion. Life is so beautiful. Tragic things do happen. Trauma happens. But we can get over all of that. We have to get through the grief. And that's the one message I would send. And I know we share that whole message. We work together for so long, how to really live the full joy of life.
Absolutely, George. Thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you, John. And I wish you all the very best. It's been a pleasure to see you and a pleasure to talk with you.
Amen.
We've just heard powerful insights from John Parr, founder of the Emotional Assertiveness Model, and George Cole-Rieser, renowned psychologist and author of Hostage at the Table and Care to Dare. Their message is clear. Leadership today is about connection, not control. It's about understanding emotion, building trust, and creating the psychological safety people need to thrive. If we ignore emotion, we lose people. If we embrace it, we lead with impact. Thanks for joining us. If this conversation inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And stay tuned. There's so much more to explore on the power of emotional assertiveness in leadership and in life. Take care. Bye-bye.